A bright red Porsche Taycan with a massive golden bow on top pulls up in front of a modest street in Boston. The driver steps out with papers in hand. "Mr. Cordell Ashworth?" calls Shepard Hayes, the transport driver. The entire neighborhood comes outside to look. Cordell Ashworth, 73 years old with his hands still covered in motor oil, stares in disbelief at the gleaming car. "Just sign here if it's really yours." Cordell takes a step back, incredulous. "This can't be for me." The neighbors begin to whisper and laugh. This has to be a joke. Who would give Cordell a car like that? At that moment, André Rieu appears quietly from around a corner, car keys in his hand. He walks straight toward Cordell. Cordell takes another step back, unable to believe what he's seeing. But what no one there knew was that everything had only started 24 hours ago. The previous afternoon, exactly at 3:30 p.m., André Rieu's dark blue Mercedes sat stalled in the middle of Beacon Street in Boston. Steam rose from the hood, and the famous violinist stood helplessly beside his car, staring at a problem he couldn't solve. "Damn it!" André muttered as he grabbed his phone to call a garage. He was on his way to an important interview with the regional television station and couldn't afford any delays. From Garage 47, Cordell Ashworth heard the sound of a car in distress. He wiped his oil-stained hands on an old rag and looked through the small window of his workshop. A man in an elegant suit stood helplessly beside an expensive car. Cordell wasn't a man of many words. At 73 years old, he'd spent his entire life repairing cars, first as a profession and now as a hobby in his own small garage behind his house. His wife Laverne had died 5 years ago, and since then repairing cars had been his way of staying busy and feeling useful. Without hesitation, he walked outside, his toolbox in hand. "Trouble?" he asked simply to André. André looked up and saw an older man with kind eyes and hands clearly accustomed to hard work. "I'm afraid so. The engine suddenly overheated. May I take a look?" André nodded gratefully. Cordell opened the hood and bent over the engine. His experienced eyes quickly scanned all the components. He said. "Your thermostat's stuck and there's a small crack in the hose here. Is it bad?" "No, nothing serious. Just wait a moment." Cordell walked back to his garage and returned within minutes with a new hose and some tools. Without asking anything, he began to work, his movements confident and efficient. André watched, impressed by the old man's skill. "Are you a mechanic?" "Retired," Cordell answered without looking up from his work. "But you never forget engines." In just 20 minutes, Cordell had solved the problem. He started the engine, listened to the sound, and nodded with satisfaction. "That should do it, but have your regular garage check it out. This was a quick fix." André felt enormously relieved. "Excellent. How much do I owe you?" Cordell shook his head. "Nothing. It was a small problem." "But your time, the parts—" "Neighbors help neighbors," Cordell said simply, even though he hadn't recognized André as a celebrity. André extended his hand. "André Rieu, very grateful for your help." "Cordell Ashworth, no problem." They shook hands firmly. André wanted to insist on payment, but something in Cordell's demeanor told him the man wouldn't accept money. "Then I'm in your debt," André said with a smile. "Forget about it," Cordell replied. "Drive carefully." André got into his car and drove away, waving to Cordell, who was cleaning up his tools. For Cordell, it had been just a normal afternoon, helping someone who needed help. But what Cordell didn't know was that his simple act of kindness had left a deep impression on André. The way the old man had refused to be paid, the natural kindness, the skill and humility, it reminded André of values he sometimes forgot in his world of fame and luxury. As André drove to his interview, he couldn't get the image of Cordell's kind eyes out of his mind. There was something special about that man, something that went beyond just fixing a car. That evening at home in his mansion, André told his wife Estelle about the encounter. He wouldn't accept money, André said. Not at all, he just said, "Neighbors help neighbors." "That's rare nowadays," Estelle replied. "Indeed. I'd like to thank him in a special way." What did you have in mind? André thought. He had a lot of money, a lot of influence, but how do you thank someone who wanted nothing? "I don't know yet, but I'm going to figure it out." Meanwhile, in his small house on Beacon Street, Cordell sat at his kitchen table eating his simple dinner. He thought about the kind man he'd helped that afternoon and felt a small warmth of satisfaction. It was nice to still be able to be useful. He had no idea his life was about to change drastically. The next morning at exactly 8 a.m., Dalton Kruger, Cordell's neighbor, was washing his car when he saw the chance to exercise his favorite hobby, gossiping and criticizing people. "Cordell," he called out loud enough for the entire street to hear, "I heard you fixed another car yesterday, for free." Of course. Cordell, who was just cleaning up his tools in his garage, looked up, but didn't answer. Always the same old Cordell, Dalton continued with a spiteful grin. Helping everyone, never getting anything back. What a fool you are. Coraline Briggs, who ran the Golden Wrench Cafe across the street, heard the conversation through her open window. She shook her head in disapproval at Dalton's words. "And what do you get in return?" Dalton continued, now consciously talking louder. "Nothing. Absolutely nothing. Other people get rich from their work, but you remain a poor old man living off his pension." Several other neighbors came outside curiously, attracted by Dalton's loud voice. "Maybe," said Mrs. Pemberton from number 52, "it's time Cordell learned to ask for payment for his work." "Exactly," Dalton agreed. "He's too nice for his own good. Look at his house, still the same old paint as 10 years ago. Look at his clothes, all from the 80s, and why? Because he's too stupid to ask for money." Cordell felt the words sting, but he refused to react. He'd worked his entire life according to his own principles, and he wasn't about to change them now because of his neighbor's mean comments. "I wonder," Dalton said with a false smile, "if you even know how to ask for money. Maybe you've forgotten." The small group of neighbors laughed, and Cordell felt his cheeks turn red with shame. He grabbed his tools and walked into his garage, closing the door behind him. "There he goes again," Dalton called out. "Running away when it gets tough." Typical Cordell. Coraline couldn't watch anymore. She walked outside and confronted the group. "Don't you all have anything better to do than ridicule a good man?" she said sharply. "Oh, Coraline," Dalton said dismissively. "We're just trying to help him. He needs to learn to stand up for himself. By publicly humiliating him, that's your idea of helping." "He needs to face reality," Mrs. Pemberton answered. "Nobody respects someone who doesn't respect himself." Coraline shook her head and walked back to her cafe, frustrated by human cruelty. That afternoon it got worse. Cordell walked to the local grocery store to shop, and along the way he heard whispers and snickers from passers-by. "There goes the free mechanic," he heard someone say. "I wonder if he gives away his groceries for free too," another joked. In the supermarket, he stood in line at the checkout when he heard the conversation behind him. "My car needs repair," a woman said to her friend. "But I'm not going to that Cordell. Who knows how good his work actually is if he doesn't charge money for it?" "Indeed," her friend replied. "If it was worth anything, he'd charge for it, wouldn't he?" Cordell felt a stab of pain. He'd repaired cars his entire life with pride and craftsmanship, and now people were doubting his competence because he was kind. That evening when he came home from shopping, he found a note taped to his front door. With trembling hands he unfolded it and read, "Poverty will never let you go. Stop fooling yourself. Nobody respects a man who doesn't know his own worth." The note wasn't signed, but Cordell recognized Dalton's handwriting. He crumpled the note and went inside. For the first time in years he felt truly lonely and worthless. Maybe they were right. Maybe he really had been a fool his entire life, helping people for free. He made a simple meal, a sandwich with cheese, and ate in silence at his kitchen table. The house felt bigger and emptier than ever since Laverne had died. At 8 p.m. he turned off all the lights and went to bed. But sleep wouldn't come. The words of his neighbors kept haunting his mind. "Fool, poor old man, nobody respects you." For the first time in his life, Cordell wondered if he'd lived his life wrong. Maybe kindness really was a weakness. Maybe he truly had been a fool. He lay awake until deep into the night, while doubt seeped through his thoughts like poison. The next morning André Rieu sat in his study, but he couldn't concentrate on his work. The image of the kind old mechanic kept returning. There had been something special about that man, a kind of natural dignity that had become rare. "Estelle," he called to his wife, "I'm going out for a drive." "Where to?" "Just around." André didn't know exactly why, but he felt the need to go back to Beacon Street. Maybe to thank him again, maybe to check if everything was okay with his car, or maybe just out of curiosity about the man who had helped him so much. At 11 a.m., he drove slowly through the street. He saw Cordell's garage, but it was closed. He parked across the street and decided to wait, hoping the old man would appear. 20 minutes later, the front door of number 47 opened. Cordell came outside, bent down, and picked something up from the ground, a crumpled piece of paper that had been lying against his door. André watched as Cordell unfolded the note and read it. Even from a distance, he could see how the old man's shoulders sagged and his face became somber. Cordell looked around as if checking whether anyone saw him and put the note in his pocket. At that moment, André understood something wasn't right. The proud, kind man he'd met the day before now looked defeated and hurt. André got out of his car and wanted to walk toward Cordell, but at that moment, Dalton Kruger came out of his house. "Morning, Cordell," Dalton called with fake friendliness. "More free repairs today?" Cordell looked up but didn't answer. "Oh, come on," Dalton continued. "You must realize it's time to grow up. You're 73 years old. You can't play charity the rest of your life." André stopped and listened, hidden behind a parked car. "You know," Dalton went on, "my nephew needs a mechanic. Real payment for real work. Interested? Or are you too proud to earn normal money?" "I'm not proud," Cordell mumbled softly. "Of course you are. Otherwise you would have been asking normal money for your work long ago. But no, you play the saint, the good man who's above money." André felt anger rising. This man was clearly bullying Cordell. "And then," Dalton continued mercilessly, "you go home and eat your dry sandwich and wonder why nobody respects you." Cordell's head dropped. I have to go." "Of course you have to go. Running away is what you do best." Cordell walked slowly back to his house and closed the door behind him. André felt his heart break. This good, kind man was being systematically humiliated by his own neighbors. The man who had helped him so naturally yesterday was being treated as if his kindness was a weakness. He wanted to go to Cordell, but realized this might make the situation worse. Instead, he drove to the Golden Wrench Cafe and went inside. Coraline Briggs looked up when he entered. "Can I help you?" "I'd like a coffee, please. And may I ask you something?" "Of course." André sat down at a table by the window from where he could see Cordell's house. "That old man there, Cordell Ashworth. How long has this been going on?" Coraline looked surprised. "Do you know him? He helped me yesterday. A remarkably kind man." "He is indeed." Coraline's face became somber. "And that's not appreciated here." "What do you mean?" "Cordell helps everyone. Always has. But the people here, they see kindness as weakness. They only respect people who charge money for everything. And he never asks for payment. Never. He always says, 'Neighbors help neighbors.' But instead of being grateful, people like Dalton ridicule him." André nodded, understanding. "How long has he been a widower?" 5 years. Laverne was a sweetheart. Since she's been gone, Cordell has become even more isolated. And nobody stands by his side. I try, but I'm just one person against an entire neighborhood full of gossip and mean behavior." André looked through the window at Cordell's house. The curtains were closed, as if the man was hiding from the world. "Coraline," André said slowly, "what would make Cordell happiest?" "Respect," she answered without hesitation. "Simply respect for who he is and what he does." "And how would he react to a grand gesture of gratitude?" Coraline looked at him curiously. "That depends. Cordell is proud in a good way. He'd never accept anything out of pity, but out of appreciation, that would be different." André finished his coffee and stood up. "Thank you for the conversation." "May I ask why you're interested?" André smiled. "Let's just say I'm someone who believes kindness should be rewarded." That afternoon, André drove home with a plan becoming increasingly clear. He'd lived his entire life in a world where everything had a price, where every favor was repaid. But Cordell had given him something no money could buy: unconditional kindness. It was time to give that back. The next morning at exactly 9 a.m., a huge transport truck stopped in front of Cordell's house. Shepard Hayes, the driver, jumped out of the cab and checked the address on his clipboard. "Beacon Street 47, he muttered. "This must be it." He opened the back of the trailer and revealed a gleaming red Porsche Taycan, complete with a golden bow on top. Within minutes, a crowd had gathered. Dalton was one of the first, his eyes wide with amazement. "What's happening here?" he asked Shepard. "I need to deliver a car to Mr. Cordell Ashworth." "Does he live here?" "Cordell?" Dalton started laughing. "Cordell can't afford bread, let alone a Porsche." More neighbors came outside. Mrs. Pemberton, Mr. Thornhill, the Cassidy family. They all stood staring at the expensive car. Coraline also came out of her cafe to look. She frowned, not understanding what was happening. Shepard knocked on Cordell's door. "Mr. Ashworth, I have a delivery for you." Cordell opened the door, still in his bathrobe, and stared in amazement at the crowd and the car. "There must be a mistake," he said slowly. "Are you Cordell Ashworth, residing at Beacon Street 47? "Yes, but—" "Then it's for you. Just sign here." Shepard held out a clipboard, but Cordell took a step back. "I didn't order a car. Certainly not a Porsche." The neighbors started whispering and laughing. "This has to be a joke," Dalton said. "Who would give Cordell a $100,000 car?" "Maybe he won the lottery and didn't tell us," Mrs. Pemberton joked. "Or maybe it's a delivery mistake," Mr. Thornhill added. Cordell felt overwhelmed by all the attention and confusion. I can't accept this. There's been an error. At that moment, André Rieu appeared from the direction of Coraline's cafe, where he'd been waiting for the right moment. He was carrying the Porsche keys in his hand. The crowd became silent when they recognized him. André Rieu, someone whispered. André walked straight toward Cordell, ignoring the staring neighbors, and smiled kindly. Good morning, Cordell. Cordell's mouth fell open. Mr. Rieu. What? What are you doing here? I've come to settle a debt. A debt? But I already told you that you didn't owe me anything. André looked around at the gathered neighbors, then back at Cordell. May I come in? We should have this conversation in private. Cordell nodded, confused, and led André inside, closing the door behind them. The neighbors remained outside, whispering and speculating. In Cordell's small living room, André sat down on the old couch. The house was neatly tidy but clearly outdated. Furniture from the 70s, faded curtains, old photos of Cordell and his deceased wife. Cordell, André began, 2 days ago you helped me with my car. That was nothing. Maybe not for you, but it meant a lot to me. Not just because you solved my problem, but because of the way you did it. Cordell sat uncomfortably on the edge of his chair. I don't understand. You asked for nothing in return. No money, no recognition, nothing. You just helped because it was the right thing to do. That's how I was raised. Exactly. And that's become rare. André leaned forward. Cordell, I want to tell you something. That car outside isn't just because you fixed my car. No, it's because I remember you from long ago. Cordell looked confused. Long ago? 20 years ago. A rainy evening in November. My parents had a breakdown on the highway. An old man stopped and helped them, refused any payment, and disappeared into the night again. Cordell's eyes widened. That was you. My father told me that story so often. He said, there are still real heroes in the world. And I met one. Tears began to well up in Cordell's eyes. Your parents, were those the kind people in that old Volkswagen? Indeed. They were on their way home after visiting my sick aunt. The car gave out in the rain, and you? I took them home and made sure their car was towed and repaired the next day, Cordell completed. Your father wanted to pay me, but I said, neighbors help neighbors, even though they lived 30 kilometers away. Cordell wiped his eyes. I'd forgotten that. I didn't, and neither did my parents. They've both passed away, but they taught me that people like you exist. André stood up and looked out the window at the Porsche. That car out there isn't just a thank you. It's a symbol of everything you stand for. But I can't accept something like that. Why not? Because I don't know how to take care of it. The insurance, the maintenance, the fuel. André smiled. Everything's already arranged. Insurance paid a year in advance. Maintenance at the official dealer also paid in advance. And it's electric, so you don't need fuel. But, Cordell, your entire life you've helped others without expecting anything back. Now it's time someone helped you. Cordell looked at the photo of his deceased wife on the windowsill. Laverne would never believe this. I think Laverne would be proud of the man she married who helped others his entire life. Cordell was quiet for a long time. The neighbors, they'll think. The neighbors will finally understand what kind of man you really are. André took the car keys from his pocket and placed them on the coffee table. The choice is yours, Cordell, but know that this car isn't being given out of pity. It's being given out of respect. Cordell looked at the keys, then at André. Why are you really doing this? Because I've learned there are two kinds of people in the world, those who take and those who give. You belong to a very rare group, those who give without counting. Outside they could still hear the neighbors talking and speculating. Will you come outside with me? André asked. Then you can decide for yourself. Cordell took a deep breath, grabbed the keys from the table and nodded. When André and Cordell came outside, the crowd of neighbors fell silent. All eyes were focused on the two men and the gleaming red Porsche that still stood there like a vision from another world. André turned to the gathered group. I want to tell you all something about this man, he said, pointing to Cordell. Dalton put his hands in his pockets, his face a mixture of embarrassment and curiosity. 3 days ago, I had car trouble. Cordell helped me without asking for anything, but that wasn't the first time he helped my family. André told the story of his parents 20 years ago, how Cordell had stopped in the pouring rain, how he'd refused to be paid, how he'd even called the next day to check if everything was okay. My father always said, André continued, that true nobility doesn't come from titles or money, but from how you treat others when no one is watching. The neighbors listened in silence. Coraline smiled through her tears. Wait a minute, Dalton suddenly interrupted, his voice hesitant. Mr. Rieu, do you mean to say that Cordell helped your parents 20 years ago? Indeed. And you've remembered this all this time? André nodded. My father told that story every Christmas. He said real heroes still existed, and he'd met one on the highway. Mrs. Pemberton came forward, her face red with shame. Cordell, I have to confess something. Last week when my grandson's bike broke, he came to you. You fixed it within an hour and refused to accept money. I remember that, Cordell said softly. I told him to be careful. I told him that people who don't ask for anything usually aren't trustworthy. Her voice broke. I taught my own grandson to doubt kindness. André looked around at the other faces. Who among you has Cordell ever helped? Slowly, hands went up. First hesitant, then more confidently. Mr. Thornhill stepped forward. My car, 3 months ago. You spent 2 hours replacing my brake pads. For free. And my scooter, young Fletcher Morris added. You taught me how to maintain it myself. My washing machine, said Mrs. Whitlock from number 38. You came on a Sunday to fix it because I couldn't do laundry with 4 kids. One by one, the neighbors began telling their stories. Cordell had apparently helped half the neighborhood in recent years, all without payment, all without expectations. Why did you all treat him so badly then? André asked, his voice now stern. Silence. Dalton was the one who answered. Because we felt guilty. Explain. When someone helps you and asks for money, you feel equal. You pay, you're even. But when someone helps you and asks for nothing, Dalton struggled with the words, then you're in their debt and that feels uncomfortable. So you ridiculed him to take away your own guilt? Dalton nodded, ashamed. We told ourselves he was stupid so we didn't have to admit he was better than us. Coraline came out of her cafe with a pot of coffee and cups. Maybe it's time for an honest conversation, she said. Cordell, sit down. She placed a chair next to the Porsche. Cordell sat down hesitantly, still overwhelmed by all the attention. Cordell, Mrs. Pemberton said, why do you do it? Why do you help everyone without asking for anything? Cordell thought before answering. My father was also a mechanic. During World War II, he helped resistance groups by repairing their vehicles. He told me, son, your hands weren't just given to make money, they were given to help. But you had a right to a normal life too, Mr. Thornhill said, to payment for your work. I had a normal life, Cordell replied. Laverne and I were happy. We had enough. More than enough meant nothing to us. André listened, fascinated by the conversation. Cordell, have you ever regretted your generosity? Honestly? Yes, this past week. When everyone was laughing at me and calling me a fool, I started to doubt. What changed that? Last night I looked at a photo of Laverne, and I heard her voice in my head saying, Cordell, you are who you are because of how you treat others, not because of how they treat you. Little Bryn Cassidy squeezed between the adults and climbed onto Cordell's lap. Grandpa Cordell, my mummy says you're an angel. An angel? Yes, because angels help people without wanting anything back. André smiled. Out of the mouths of babes. Fletcher Morris, the teenager whose scooter Cordell had repaired, stepped forward. Mr. Ashworth, I want to give you something. He pulled an envelope from his pocket. I've been saving for 3 months from my part-time job for the scooter repair. Fletcher, that's not necessary. Yes, it is necessary. Not because you're asking, but because I want to give it. André watched as other neighbors began doing the same. Mrs. Pemberton went inside and came back with an envelope. Mr. Thornhill did the same. What are you all doing? Cordell asked, amazed. We're making something right, Mrs. Pemberton said. We've taken advantage of your goodness for too long without giving anything back. But I don't want money. Then give it to a charity, Dalton said, also with an envelope in his hand. But we have to do this to be able to respect ourselves. Within 10 minutes, Cordell had a stack of envelopes in his hands. André estimated there was at least $2,000 in them. See, André said to Cordell, goodness always comes back. Sometimes it takes a while, but it always comes back. Coraline started applauding, and the rest of the neighborhood joined in. It wasn't applause for the Porsche or for André Rieu, but for Cordell Ashworth, the man who had given his entire life without counting. This car, André said, placing his hand on the Porsche, isn't just a gift. It's recognition of a life of service to others. He turned to Cordell. My friend, it's time you learned that giving is a circular movement. You've given your entire life. Now it's time to receive. Cordell looked at the car, then at André, then at the neighbors who had plagued him for years. He began, but his voice broke. Grandpa Cordell, little Bryn Cassidy called from number 52. Is that car really yours? Cordell looked at the little girl, whose bike he'd fixed for free last month. I think so, sweetheart. Wow, can we look inside? André smiled. "Why doesn't Cordell show you all how it works?" With trembling hands, Cordell pressed the key. The Porsche gave a soft hum, and all the lights came on. The neighbors came closer, their earlier mockery replaced by genuine admiration. "This is unbelievable," Mr. Thornhill muttered. "Cordell, I have to say I regret what I said earlier." Dalton still stood there, visibly uncomfortable. He'd mocked the most, but now seemed too small to say anything. André looked at Cordell. "Would you like to take a test drive?" "I haven't driven such an expensive car in 20 years, Cordell said nervously. "Then it's time." Cordell carefully opened the door. The interior was beautiful, leather seats, a digital dashboard, everything he could never have imagined. "Mr. Rieu," he said, "this is too much. I'm just an old mechanic." "No," André corrected. "You're a man who has made a difference his entire life, and that deserves recognition." Coraline came forward. "Cordell, accept it. You deserve this more than anyone." Slowly, Cordell got behind the wheel. André got in on the passenger side. "Just press the start button," André instructed. The car started silently. Cordell's eyes widened in amazement. "It makes no sound. Electric. No exhaust gases, no noise, just pure power." Cordell drove carefully out of the street, leaving the neighbors behind. For the first time in years, he felt something he'd forgotten. Pride. "André," he said as they drove through the streets of Boston, "I still don't understand why you're doing this." "Because," André said, "my entire career I've tried to give people joy with music, but you give people something much more valuable. You give them faith in human goodness. I just do what feels right." "Exactly, and that's what makes you so special." They drove for 20 minutes, André pointing out all the car's features. Cordell listened attentively, his mechanic's brain eager to learn how this new technology worked. When they returned to Beacon Street, there was an even bigger crowd. The news had spread, and people from other streets had come to look. "Cordell," someone called. "Is it true André Rieu gave you a Porsche?" Cordell parked carefully and got out. He looked around at all the faces, some curious, others admiring, and a few still skeptical. "It's true," he said simply. "But why?" A woman he didn't know asked. André took over. "Because kindness is the most valuable currency in the world, and Cordell is the richest man I know." Dalton finally came forward, his face red with shame. "Cordell," he said with difficulty, I have to apologize for the things I said." Cordell looked at his neighbor. "Dalton, we're all human. We all make mistakes. But I was mean, unnecessarily mean. And now you're being honest, that's what counts." André watched as the two men shook hands. It was a small act, but he understood its significance. "There's something else," André said to Cordell. "This car is only the beginning." "The beginning?" "I want to make you a proposal. My foundation has a community service program. We're looking for people like you, people who naturally give and help. Interested?" "What would that involve?" "Paid work, but doing what you've done your entire life. Helping people, repairing cars for people who can't afford it, teaching young people about mechanics, coordinating volunteer work." Cordell's eyes began to glisten. "You mean I'd be paid to help others?" "Exactly. $3,000 a month plus expenses." The crowd began to murmur with surprise and approval. "Cordell is finally being recognized for what he's worth," Coraline said loud enough for everyone to hear. Little Bryn ran to Cordell and hugged his legs. "Grandpa Cordell, now you can help even more people." Cordell lifted the little girl up. "Yes, sweetheart, maybe I can." André looked around at the gathered crowd. "I learned a lot today from this man. He reminded me of something I'd almost forgotten." "What?" someone asked. "That the most beautiful music doesn't always come from instruments. Sometimes it comes from hearts that want to help others." Cordell set Bryn down and walked to André. "Mr. Rieu, André, I don't know how to thank you. Thank me by continuing to do what you've always done. Thank me by taking that job. Thank me by inspiring other people to give too." Cordell looked at his new car, at the gathered neighbors, at little Bryn, who looked up at him with admiring eyes. "Oh, you know," he said, his voice stronger than it had been in days, "I've repaired engines my entire life. But today you repaired something inside me that I didn't even know was broken." "What's that?" André asked. "My faith that goodness is rewarded. My faith that what we do matters." André smiled. "Cordell, you gave me more than you realize. You reminded me of what's truly important." The two men embraced while the crowd applauded. Later that evening, when everyone had gone home, Cordell and Coraline sat in her café. Through the window they could see the Porsche gleaming under the streetlights. "Do you believe all this?" Coraline asked. "No," Cordell smiled. "But I'm going to enjoy every minute of it." "What are you going to do with the car?" "Drive it, help people, and maybe inspire other people to be kind too." "And the job?" "I'm taking it. It's time I got paid for what I love to do." Coraline poured him another coffee. "Cordell, you deserve all of this." "You know what the best part is?" Cordell said, looking at the photo of Laverne he always carried with him. "For the first time since Laverne died, I feel like I have a purpose again." "You always had a purpose." "Yes, but now someone else has seen it too." That night, for the first time in months, Cordell slept peacefully. Outside stood his new car. But more importantly, inside his heart something had healed that he thought was lost forever. The conviction that goodness is rewarded and that every act of kindness is worth it. And in his dreams, he heard Laverne's voice. "I'm so proud of you, dear man. You never stopped being good even when it was hard." Cordell smiled in his sleep. Tomorrow would be a new day, full of new possibilities to help, to give, and to prove that kindness is the most powerful force in the world. The next morning, Cordell woke up earlier than usual. For a moment, he thought the previous day had been a dream. But when he looked out the window and saw the red Porsche parked in front of his house, he knew it was all real. He made his coffee and sat at the kitchen table with the envelope André had given him, the official job offer from the Rieu Foundation. Position: Community Service Coordinator, Automotive Program. Salary: $3,000 month plus expenses. Start date: immediate responsibilities: provide free automotive repair services to low-income families, teach mechanics to at-risk youth, coordinate volunteer programs. Cordell read it 3 times, still unable to believe it. At 73 years old, he was starting a new chapter in his life. There was a knock on the door. When he opened it, Fletcher Morris stood there with his backpack. "Mr. Ashworth, I wanted to ask you something." "Come in, Fletcher." The teenager sat nervously at the kitchen table. "I heard about the job Mr. Rieu gave you, the one about teaching young people about mechanics." "That's right." Could I be your first student?" Cordell felt warmth spread through his chest. "You want to learn?" "I want to learn from the best. And more than that," Fletcher paused, "I want to learn how to be like you, how to help people without expecting anything back." "Fletcher, that's one of the nicest things anyone has ever said to me." "So is that a yes?" Cordell extended his hand. "When can you start?" "Today? Then let's go to the garage." As they walked to the garage together, Coraline came out of her cafe. "Cordell, already starting your new job, I see." "No time like the present," Cordell called back with a smile. Over the next few days, something remarkable happened in the neighborhood. The story of Cordell and the Porsche had spread throughout Boston, and suddenly, people began looking at kindness differently. Mrs. Pemberton started a neighborhood food bank, inspired by Cordell's example. "If he can give his skills freely, I can share food," she said. Mr. Thornhill began offering free accounting advice to elderly neighbors who struggled with their taxes. Even Dalton, the biggest critic, started changing. He approached Cordell one morning with an unusual request. "Cordell, I've been thinking. My nephew, the one I mentioned, he really does need help. Not as a mechanic, but he's been in trouble. Drugs, bad crowd. I was wondering if you could talk to him." Cordell looked at the man who had tormented him for so long. "Bring him by this afternoon." "Just like that? After everything I said to you?" "Dalton, if I held grudges, I'd be the fool everyone thought I was. Bring the boy. We'll figure something out." That afternoon, Dalton arrived with his nephew, Marcus, a lanky 17-year-old with haunted eyes and defensive body language. "Marcus," Cordell said simply, "you ever work on cars?" "No, sir." "Want to learn?" Marcus shrugged. "I guess. Not good enough. Do you want to learn, or are you just here because your uncle made you come?" For the first time, Marcus looked directly at Cordell. "Honestly, I don't know what I want. Everything's messed up." "Fair answer. Come here." Cordell led him to an old engine he was rebuilding. "This engine is like life. When it's broken, you don't throw it away. You take it apart, find what's damaged, and fix it piece by piece. Sometimes it takes time. Sometimes it's frustrating. But if you're patient and willing to work, you can make it run again." Marcus stared at the engine. "You think I can be fixed?" "I think you can fix yourself if you have the right tools and someone willing to help." Over the next weeks, Marcus came every day after school. Cordell taught him about engines, but more importantly, he taught him about discipline, patience, and self-worth. 6 weeks after the Porsche delivery, André Rieu returned to Boston for a concert at Symphony Hall. But before the performance, he drove to Beacon Street. The transformation was remarkable. Cordell's garage now had a professional sign, Community Auto Care, free services for those in need. Inside, Cordell was working with Fletcher and 3 other young people, teaching them how to replace brake pads. Remember, Cordell was saying, precision matters. This isn't just about fixing a car, it's about keeping someone safe. André watched from the doorway, not wanting to interrupt. Mr. Ashworth, one of the students asked, why do you do this for free? Don't you want to get rich? Cordell put down his wrench. Let me tell you something. I've been poor and I've been comfortable. The difference isn't as big as you think, but I've always been rich in the things that matter. Good friends, meaningful work, the ability to help others. That kind of wealth you can't put in a bank. But the Porsche was a gift from someone who understood that some debts can't be paid with money. It was recognition, not payment. There's a difference. André stepped into the garage. Well said. André, Cordell's face lit up. Students, this is Mr. Rieu. He's the reason we're all standing here today. The young people looked at André with recognition and awe. Actually, André said, Cordell is the reason. I just helped people see what was already there. After the lesson ended and the students left, André and Cordell sat in the Golden Wrench Cafe with Coraline. Tell me, André said, how has life changed? In every way, Cordell replied. I'm teaching 5 students now. We've repaired 23 cars for families who couldn't afford it. Marcus, Dalton's nephew, he's been clean for 5 weeks and is talking about becoming a mechanic. And the neighborhood? Different. People smile more, help each other more. It's like kindness became contagious. Coraline added, he started something beautiful. People who never talk to each other are now organizing community dinners, helping elderly neighbors with groceries, starting a tool-lending library. All because of one Porsche? André asked with a knowing smile. No, Cordell said seriously. All because someone decided that goodness deserved recognition. You didn't just give me a car, André. You gave the whole neighborhood permission to be kind again. 3 months later, the local news station came to do a story on Cordell's program. The segment was titled, The Mechanic Who Fixed a Community. In the interview, Cordell sat in his garage, surrounded by his students. Reporter, Mr. Ashworth, your story has inspired people across Boston. What do you want people to know? Cordell, that kindness isn't weakness, that helping others doesn't make you a fool. It makes you human, and that sometimes the smallest act of generosity can change everything. Reporter, and the Porsche? Some people say it was excessive. Cordell, those people don't understand. That car wasn't about the money. It was about one person seeing another person's worth and deciding to honor it. We all need that sometimes. To be seen, to be valued, to know our lives matter. Reporter, what would you say to André Rieu if he were watching? Cordell looked directly at the camera. Thank you for reminding an old man that goodness matters. Thank you for showing my community that kindness deserves respect. But most of all, thank you for understanding that some debts are paid not with money, but with recognition and love. A year after the Porsche arrived, Beacon Street had been completely transformed. The neighborhood organized an annual Kindness Day in Cordell's honor, where everyone performed free services for each other. Cordell's program had expanded to 3 locations across Boston. 72 students had learned mechanics. Over 200 families had received free car repairs. Marcus, Dalton's nephew, was now Cordell's assistant instructor, teaching other at-risk youth while maintaining his sobriety. The Porsche still sat in Cordell's driveway, gleaming in the sun. But if you asked Cordell about his greatest treasure, he wouldn't point to the car. He'd point to the wall of photos in his garage. Every student he'd taught, every family he'd helped, every life he'd touched. On the anniversary of the day the Porsche arrived, the neighborhood threw a surprise celebration. Everyone gathered on Beacon Street, the same street where Cordell had once been mocked and ridiculed. André Rieu came specially for the occasion, bringing his violin. As the sun set, André played a special melody, not a famous classical piece, but an original composition he'd written called The Mechanic's Heart. The music floated through the evening air, and Cordell stood listening with tears in his eyes, surrounded by his students, his neighbors, and his friends. Little Bryn Cassidy, now 7 years old, tugged on his sleeve. "Grandpa Cordell, why are you crying?" Cordell picked her up. "Because I'm happy, sweetheart. Because I finally understand something." "What?" "That Laverne was right. We are who we are by how we treat others, not by how they treat us. And when you live that way, the whole world becomes richer." As André's final note faded into the twilight, Coraline raised her glass. "To Cordell Ashworth, the man who taught us that the greatest wealth is measured not in dollars, but in the lives we touch. To Cordell, the crowd echoed. And in that moment, standing in the street that had once been his place of humiliation, surrounded by people who now honored him, Cordell Ashworth understood the truth that had guided his entire life. Kindness is never wasted. Goodness is never foolish. And sometimes, just sometimes, the world recognizes what truly matters. The Porsche Taycan gleamed in his driveway, a symbol not of wealth, but of recognition, not of payment, but of respect. And every time Cordell drove it, he remembered, the greatest gifts aren't things we can buy, but the dignity we give to others and the kindness we show to a world that desperately needs it. Author's note: this story is a reminder that in a world that often values profit over people, true wealth comes from the lives we touch and the kindness we freely give. Cordell Ashworth's legacy wasn't a car. It was a community transformed by the simple, radical act of helping others without expecting anything in return.